Chapter 1. A Boy by the River. The Mississippi River, wide and powerful, flowed endlessly past the feet of a small boy named Sam Clemens. He was just a child, standing on the riverbank, watching the water as it rushed by, twisting and turning. The sound of the water splashing against the rocks, the steady rhythm of the river's flow, filled the air. The river was alive. It spoke to him, whispered secrets only he could hear. Sam was fascinated. The river seemed magical. It called to him, like a friend waiting for him to come and play. He could spend hours just staring, his young mind drifting with the current, imagining all the places the river could take him. One day, he whispered to himself, "I'll go wherever the river goes, as far as it flows." Born in the small town of Hannibal, Missouri, Sam was not yet the famous Mark Twain that the world would come to know. No, he was simply a curious boy with a big imagination. His world was small, but the river made it seem huge, full of adventures waiting to be discovered. Sam's heart raced with excitement every time he thought about it. He imagined grand steamboats sailing down the river, their tall chimneys puffing out smoke, their big paddle wheels churning the water. The captains of those boats. Oh, how Sam admired them. He imagined himself standing at the helm of one of those boats one day. "Someday I'll be a captain," he thought, a grin spreading across his face. "I'll know every twist and turn of the river." But for now, the river was his playground. Sam and his friends would run along the banks, chasing each other, laughing, and sometimes even jumping into the water, letting the cool current pull them along for a while. The river was both thrilling and dangerous, and that only made Sam love it more. The people of Hannibal all knew the river could be dangerous. Sometimes it flooded, and sometimes boats crashed into the rocks. But none of that scared Sam. No, it only made him more curious. The river's power fascinated him. It was as if it held the secrets of the world, and he was determined to discover them. One hot summer day, Sam sat on the shore, watching the river with dreamy eyes. The sun was high in the sky, shining down on the water, making it sparkle like 1,000 diamonds. He stretched out his legs, letting his bare toes sink into the soft, warm mud. "I wonder what's out there, beyond the river," he thought aloud, his voice soft, as if afraid to disturb the peaceful moment. He had heard stories, so many stories about places far away. Men who traveled on the river spoke of cities with tall buildings, of wild frontiers, and of the ocean, vast and endless. Sam couldn't imagine such things. But the river seemed like the key to it all. "Maybe if I follow the river long enough," he said to himself, "I'll see the ocean. I'll see the world." Sam's family, the Clemens, didn't have much money. His father, John Clemens, had dreams of becoming rich, but those dreams never came true. Life in Hannibal was hard, especially after his father passed away. His mother, Jane, was a strong woman, always doing her best to keep the family together. But young Sam, his heart wasn't set on a life of work and hardship. He wanted something more, something bigger. And as he sat by the river, he felt it, deep down in his bones. The river was calling him, promising him adventure, excitement, and freedom. He couldn't stay in Hannibal forever, no. He knew that. One day he would leave. One day he would follow the river to wherever it might lead. Suddenly, a steamboat appeared in the distance, its white smoke billowing into the blue sky. Sam jumped to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He ran down the bank to get a closer look, his feet kicking up dirt as he went. The boat was huge, bigger than anything Sam had ever seen up close. The large paddle wheel at the back of the boat splashed water into the air as it slowly pushed its way down the river. Sam stood there, breathless, watching the boat pass by. The captain stood tall on the deck, his hand resting confidently on the wheel. Sam's eyes lit up with admiration. That was the life he wanted, the life he dreamed about every night. As the boat sailed off into the distance, Sam smiled to himself. "One day," he whispered, "I'll be up there too. I'll be the one steering the ship, and the river will be mine." The wind picked up slightly, blowing through his hair as he stood alone by the water. The river flowed on, steady and unstoppable, just like his dreams. The Mississippi had a power that Sam couldn't explain. It was more than just water. It was life. It was mystery. And it was freedom. Little did Sam know that this river, this powerful force that had captured his young heart, would not only shape his future, but also inspire some of the greatest stories the world would ever read. For now, though, he was just a boy, dreaming by the water, with the Mississippi River flowing endlessly by his feet. Chapter 2. The Hannibal Hills and Endless Skies. The town of Hannibal, Missouri, small, quiet, and nestled along the Mississippi River, was Sam Clemens' world. But to Sam it was more than just a town. It was his playground, a place filled with wild hills, deep woods, and endless skies. Everywhere he looked, there was adventure waiting for him. The hills rose up around Hannibal like green waves, calling to Sam and his friends. The boys would run through the tall grass, their laughter echoing in the air. The wind, soft and warm, swept across the hills, pushing the clouds through the bright blue sky. Sam would lie back on the soft ground, staring up at those clouds, watching them change shape and float away. What's up there? He'd wonder. Beyond the hills? Beyond the skies? He could feel his imagination soaring. In his mind, these hills were more than just hills. They were mountains, towers, castles waiting to be explored. Every tree was a new hiding place, every rock a treasure waiting to be found. Sam and his friends would spend hours running, climbing, and discovering secret spots that only they knew about. There was something magical about Hannibal. The town was small, yes, but to a boy like Sam, it seemed boundless. The endless sky stretched above, so big, so blue, it made him believe anything was possible. He could dream as big as the sky itself. One of Sam's favorite places was the woods just beyond town. Thick trees, twisting vines, and the cool shade made the woods feel mysterious. The sound of birds singing and the rustle of leaves filled the air. Sam and his friends would sneak off into the woods, pretending they were explorers or pirates, searching for hidden treasures. "Watch out!" one of them would shout. "There's a bear behind that tree." And they'd all run, their hearts racing, laughing as they escaped the imaginary danger. Sometimes they'd pretend to be outlaws, the kind of wild, daring characters Sam would later bring to life in his stories. The hills and woods of Hannibal weren't just a place to play. They were where Sam's imagination began to take root. Every adventure, every wild chase through the trees would later become the seeds of his famous stories. Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn would come from these very days, from the games he played and the dreams he dreamed under the Missouri sky. One warm summer evening, as the sun began to sink below the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sam sat alone on one of those hills. He gazed out over his town, over the river, the woods, and the far-off horizon. He could feel something deep inside him stirring, a need to see more, to do more. Hannibal was his home, but Sam knew he wouldn't stay there forever. As much as he loved those hills, he longed to know what lay beyond them. He felt it in his bones, that hunger for adventure, for the unknown. One day, he thought, I'll leave this place. I'll see the world. But for now, the hills and skies of Hannibal were enough. They were his, filled with the magic only a boy like Sam could see. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Sam lay back once more, watching the sky turn to velvet, the stars lighting up the night like little candles. He smiled to himself. "The stars," he whispered. "Maybe they're guiding me. Maybe they know where I'll go next." The world beyond Hannibal was waiting for him, but in these moments, Sam was content. The hills, the river, the woods, they were shaping him, filling his heart and mind with the stories that would one day make him Mark Twain, the storyteller who would bring these places to life for the rest of the world to see. The hills, the endless skies, the magical adventures of a young boy growing up in Hannibal, Missouri, they would stay with him forever, guiding him, just like the stars above. Chapter 3. A Tragic Loss. The Clemens family home was quiet. Too quiet. Sam sat on the front steps, staring out at the street, his heart heavy. His father, John Clemens, had been sick for days. Sam had seen it before, his father coughing, looking tired, but this time felt different. It was worse, much worse. John Clemens was a proud man, a lawyer who dreamed of giving his family a better life. He worked hard, but luck never seemed to be on his side. Still, Sam admired him. He was a figure of strength, of discipline. But now he was weak, lying in bed, barely able to speak. The day came and Sam knew something was wrong. His mother's face told the story before she spoke the words. She came to him, her eyes filled with sadness, and said quietly, "Sam, your father is gone." Gone! Sam couldn't believe it. His father, the man who had been his guide, his protector, was gone. The world felt like it had stopped. Everything around him blurred, and for a moment, Sam felt like he was floating in a terrible dream. His heart pounded as the realization hit him. No more would he hear his father's voice. No more would he see that familiar, serious face. His father had always seemed invincible. But now, that was all gone. The house seemed so empty after that. Sam's mother, Jane Clemens, tried to stay strong, but Sam could see the pain in her eyes. His older brother Orion did his best to help, but it wasn't enough. The family had no money, no way to support themselves. It was as if the walls were closing in on them. Sam was only 11 years old, but in that moment, he felt like a grown man. He had to be. He had to help his family, to take responsibility. There was no time for boyhood games or dreams anymore. Life had changed, suddenly and brutally. The carefree days of running through the hills or playing by the river were over. Days after his father's death, Sam found himself walking alone, his feet taking him to the riverbank, the place where he had always gone to think, to dream. But now, the river didn't bring him peace. Instead, the water seemed darker, the current rougher. His world had been shattered, and the future felt uncertain. As he sat by the river, Sam thought about his father's struggles. John Clemens had always dreamed big, but life had never been kind to him. He had never achieved the wealth or success he wanted. Watching his father's hard life had left a mark on Sam. He knew one thing now. He didn't want to end up the same way. He wanted something more. He didn't know what it was yet, but he felt it deep in his bones. The world outside Hannibal was calling to him. Maybe it was the river. Maybe it was something else. But Sam knew that his father's death had changed him forever. "I won't stay here," Sam whispered to the wind. "I won't let life beat me down." His father's death was like a spark. It lit something inside Sam, a fire that would push him toward independence and adventure. He would have to leave Hannibal one day, leave behind the safety of the hills and the comfort of his childhood. There was a whole world out there, waiting to be explored. But now, as he sat by the river, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. His family needed him. He couldn't just run off into the unknown, not yet. He would have to grow up fast, find work, help put food on the table. His dreams would have to wait. Sam's world had changed forever, but deep inside his spirit remained strong. He wasn't broken, no. He was determined. The river still called to him, whispering promises of adventure, of escape. He would go one day. He would explore the world. But for now, he would be the man his family needed him to be. The loss of his father was painful, but it also shaped Sam. It gave him the strength to face hardship, to survive in a world that wasn't always kind. Little did Sam know, this pain, this loss, would one day make him the storyteller the world would come to love. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sam stood up. He took a deep breath, wiping his eyes. He looked out at the river one last time before turning back toward home. Life had changed, but Sam was ready. Chapter 4. Huckleberries and Tomfoolery. Laughter echoed through the streets of Hannibal, loud, wild, and full of mischief. At the center of it all was young Sam Clemens, his face lit up with excitement, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of adventure. Trouble seemed to follow him wherever he went. But Sam didn't mind. He loved it. Every day was an adventure, and Sam made sure to fill it with as much fun and as many pranks as possible. He wasn't alone, of course. Sam had a group of friends who were just as wild as he was. Together, they roamed the town, climbed trees, played games by the river, and dreamed up all sorts of trouble. They didn't have money or fancy toys, but they had their imagination. And that was enough. One of their favorite places to go was Jackson's Island, a small piece of land in the middle of the Mississippi River. The island felt like their own secret world, hidden away from adults, rules, and responsibilities. Here they could be whoever they wanted to be, pirates, explorers, outlaws. "Let's be pirates today!" Sam shouted one afternoon, his voice full of excitement. "Aye, Captain Sam!" his friend shouted back, waving a stick in the air like it was a sword. They ran through the tall grass, swinging their makeshift weapons, pretending they were searching for buried treasure. Every bush, every tree was filled with danger. They could hear the voices of imaginary enemies in the wind. "There! Behind that tree!" one of the boys yelled. And off they went, charging into their next adventure. But not all their games were innocent fun. Oh no! Sam had a talent for trouble, and sometimes his pranks went a little too far. Once, Sam and his friends decided to sneak into the local cemetery at night. They had heard stories about ghosts, and what better way to test their bravery than by spending a night among the graves? The moon was high, casting long shadows across the cemetery, making the tombstones look even more mysterious and spooky. Sam's heart raced, not with fear but with excitement. He loved the feeling of danger, the thrill of doing something he wasn't supposed to. "Come on," he whispered, motioning to his friends. "Let's hide behind that tree and scare anyone who comes by." They crouched down, holding their breath, waiting for their moment. And then they heard it. A noise in the distance. Someone was coming. Sam grinned, ready to spring his prank, but then the figure stepped into view. It wasn't one of the local boys. It was Old Man Jenkins, the town's night watchman. Without thinking, Sam leaped from behind the tree, letting out the loudest, most terrifying yell he could manage. His friends followed, shouting and waving their arms. Old Man Jenkins nearly jumped out of his skin. "You rascals!" he yelled, his voice shaking with shock and anger. Sam and the boys ran as fast as they could, laughing the whole way. They barely made it back to town before collapsing on the grass, out of breath but full of joy. The night was a success, another adventure in the books. But Sam's pranks weren't always about scaring people. Sometimes they were just about having a bit of fun, or getting a little revenge. There was one summer day when Sam and his best friend, Tom Blankenship, spotted a group of boys fishing by the river. These boys, always dressed in clean clothes and acting like they were better than everyone else, had teased Sam and his friends earlier that day. "Let's give them something to remember," Sam whispered, a sly grin spreading across his face. Tom nodded, and before long, they had gathered a bunch of old huckleberries that had fallen from a tree. Quietly, they snuck up behind the boys, and without warning, splat! Huckleberries flew through the air, landing right in the middle of the boys' fancy fishing hats and shirts. The shocked looks on their faces were priceless. Sam and Tom couldn't hold back their laughter as they dashed off into the woods, their hearts pounding with the thrill of their victory. "That'll teach them!" Sam shouted between fits of laughter. It wasn't just about causing trouble. It was about standing up for themselves in the only way they knew how. These adventures, these moments of mischief and laughter, would later become the heart of Mark Twain's most famous stories. Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn were born in these wild, carefree days of Sam's childhood. The laughter, the danger, the freedom, it all made its way into his books, where the whole world could feel the thrill of those boyhood adventures. Sam's childhood in Hannibal wasn't easy, but it was full of life, full of imagination, and full of the kind of wild energy that made him who he was. Every prank, every race through the woods, every stolen huckleberry told the story of a boy who would one day become a great writer. As the sun set on another day of adventure, Sam stretched out on the grass, his mind already racing with ideas for the next great caper. For Sam Clemens, the world was a playground, and he intended to explore every inch of it. Chapter 5. Fireside Tales and Early Inspirations. The fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the small room. Sam sat close to the flames, his knees pulled up to his chest, his eyes fixed on his mother. Jane Clemens, wise and gentle, sat in her rocking chair, her hands resting in her lap as she began to speak. This was one of Sam's favorite times, sitting by the fire, listening to his mother's stories. Her voice was soft but strong, filled with the kind of wisdom that only comes from a life of hard work and love. Every night her tales brought comfort, hope, and a sense of adventure to young Sam's heart. "Do you want to hear the story of Brer Rabbit again?" Jane asked, her eyes twinkling with warmth. Sam nodded eagerly. He had heard the story 100 times, but it never got old. there was something magical about the way his mother told it. The way her voice would rise and fall, the way she brought the characters to life. And so, she began. Once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a clever little rabbit named Brer Rabbit. As she spoke, Sam could picture it all so clearly. He could see the rabbit sneaking through the bushes, outsmarting his enemies, escaping from danger. His imagination ran wild, filling in every detail of the story. Jane's words seemed to dance in the air, full of life and meaning. But it wasn't just the adventure that captured Sam's attention. No, it was something deeper. His mother's stories often carried important lessons about life, about loss, about kindness and hope. Sam didn't just hear the words. He felt them. Some nights, Jane would tell stories from her own life, tales of her childhood, of the struggles she faced, of people she had loved and lost. These were not stories of heroes and villains, but stories of ordinary people, like them, trying to make it through hard times. "One winter," she said softly, her eyes looking into the fire as if she could see the past. "We didn't have enough food. The crops had failed and the cold was so fierce. But we survived. We found ways to help each other. And that's what matters, Sam. Kindness. It's what gets us through." Sam listened closely, his heart swelling with emotion. His mother's voice carried so much love and strength even when the stories were sad. She had seen pain. She had faced challenges, but she was still full of hope. Her stories weren't just words, they were lessons. Sam often thought about these stories long after the fire had died down and he had gone to bed. They made him feel something he couldn't quite explain, a stirring inside him, a desire to tell stories of his own one day. "I wonder," he whispered to himself one night lying in bed, "if I could tell stories like that. Stories that make people laugh, cry, and think." He imagined himself sitting by the fire, his own children gathered around him, hanging on to his every word. He dreamed of creating characters as clever as Brer Rabbit, as brave as the heroes in his mother's tales. Stories that could make people feel less alone, just like his mother's did for him. Sometimes Jane would notice the faraway look in Sam's eyes as he sat by the fire, lost in thought. She smiled, knowing that something special was stirring inside her son. She didn't push him, didn't rush him. She knew that one day, his heart would lead him to where he needed to be. One evening, after finishing a particularly touching story about a family who lost everything but found hope in each other, Jane paused. She looked at Sam with a soft, knowing smile. "You have stories inside you too, Sam," she said gently. "One day you'll tell them, and they'll be beautiful." Sam's eyes widened. "Do you think so?" he asked, a little uncertain but full of hope. "I know so," Jane replied with confidence. "You've always had a way with words, and with people. One day, you'll tell stories that touch people's hearts, just like these do for you." Those words stayed with Sam. They echoed in his mind, even when he was out with his friends causing trouble or sitting by the river, dreaming of adventure. His mother believed in him. And because of that, he started to believe in himself. The fireside tales, filled with warmth and wisdom, became a foundation for Sam's growing imagination. They showed him that stories had power, the power to heal, to inspire, and to change lives. He knew then that he wanted to be a storyteller, someone who could bring joy, comfort, and even a little bit of adventure to others. The fire crackled once more, the night growing late. Jane finished her tale, kissed Sam on the forehead, and sent him off to bed. But as he lay under the covers, Sam's mind was alive with ideas, with dreams of the stories he would one day tell. Chapter 6. A town filled with characters. The town of Hannibal. Small, sleepy, yet bursting with life. Everywhere Sam Clemens went, he found someone new to watch, to listen to, and to learn from. The people of Hannibal weren't just ordinary folks to Sam. They were characters. And each one, in their own strange and wonderful way, would someday make their way into his stories. Take Preacher Jones, for example. He was a tall man with a booming voice that could be heard halfway across town when he got excited during a sermon. Every Sunday, Sam and his family sat in the small church, listening to Preacher Jones tell stories from the Bible, waving his hands dramatically in the air. His face would turn red with passion as he spoke, and sometimes Sam couldn't help but smile to himself. The preacher's stories were good, sure, but Sam thought they could use a little more fun, a little more adventure. One day, as Sam and his friend Tom walked home from church, Tom nudged him and said, "Preacher Jones sure knows how to talk, don't he? I bet he could go on and on for hours if no one stopped him." Sam laughed. "He'd probably keep talking till the moon came out, maybe even longer." The two boys chuckled as they imagined Preacher Jones still standing in the church, preaching to an empty room, long after everyone had gone home. Sam filed away the preacher's dramatic flair in the back of his mind. Someday he knew he'd use it for a character or two. And then there was Mr. Brown, the shopkeeper. Sam wasn't sure he liked Mr. Brown. He was a sneaky man, always counting his coins, always watching customers carefully as if they were going to steal something. Sam once overheard him say, "Trust no one, especially not the children." That made Sam laugh. He wasn't planning to steal anything, but the fact that Mr. Brown was so suspicious made Sam's mischievous side want to play a trick or two on him. One afternoon, Sam and his friends were walking past Mr. Brown's shop. Sam grinned and whispered, "Watch this." He casually walked into the shop, picked up a small item, and waved it in the air as if he were about to leave without paying. Mr. Brown's eyes widened. "Hey, you there, stop right now!" he shouted, rushing toward Sam, his face turning red. Sam laughed and quickly put the item back on the counter. "I wasn't going to take it, Mr. Brown," he said, still grinning. "Just checking if you were paying attention." Mr. Brown huffed, crossing his arms and glaring at Sam. "You watch yourself, boy," he warned. Sam left the shop, still chuckling to himself. The way Mr. Brown reacted was priceless. The grumpy, sneaky shopkeeper with his suspicious ways. Sam knew he'd met the perfect character for one of his future stories. But Hannibal wasn't just full of serious or strange adults. Oh no, the kids in town were just as interesting. There was Jim, the boy who could always be found fishing by the river. Jim didn't talk much, but he always seemed to know what was going on in town. He'd sit quietly, casting his line into the water. But if you asked him a question, he'd surprise you with how much he knew. "Jim," Sam asked one day, "how do you know so much if you're always here by the river?" Jim shrugged. "People talk, Sam, and I listen." Sam admired that about Jim. He wasn't loud or wild like the other boys, but he had a wisdom that even adults seemed to respect. In a way, Jim was like the river. Quiet on the surface, but if you looked closely, there was always something moving underneath. Then there was Becky Thatcher, the girl who made Sam's heart skip a beat. She was smart, confident, and had a sparkle in her eye that made her stand out. Whenever Sam saw her, He felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness, like he didn't know whether to say something clever or run away. Becky was different from the other girls in town. She had a sense of adventure, just like Sam. Once, while Sam and his friends were playing by the river, Becky joined them. "What are you boys doing?" she asked, hands on her hips. "Playing pirates," Sam replied, trying to sound cool. "Well," Becky said with a smirk, "I think I'd make a better pirate captain than any of you." The boys looked at each other, surprised, and Sam couldn't help but laugh. Becky Thatcher, a pirate captain? The idea was wild, and he loved it. Someday, Sam thought, he'd write a story about a girl just like her, bold, clever, and not afraid to stand up to the boys. As Sam walked through Hannibal each day, he realized something. The town was alive with stories. The people weren't just people. They were characters, each one unique, with their own quirks and personalities. Whether it was the loud preacher, the grumpy shopkeeper, or the quiet boy by the river, they all inspired Sam in ways he couldn't explain. Little did they know that the small boy running through the streets of Hannibal, laughing, causing trouble, and watching them closely, would one day grow up to be Mark Twain, the writer who would bring their stories to life for the whole world to read. Sam's hometown wasn't just a place. It was the heart of his imagination, and the characters of Hannibal would stay with him forever. Chapter 7. Steamboats and River Captains. The Mississippi River, wide, powerful, and full of mystery, was Sam's favorite place in the world. But there was something even more exciting than the river itself. The steamboats. Those grand floating machines with their tall chimneys and big paddle wheels were a sight to behold. Every time Sam heard the low, deep whistle of a steamboat echoing through the air, his heart would leap with excitement. Sam would run as fast as he could to the riverbank, hoping to catch a glimpse of one of those majestic boats gliding down the river. The sound of the churning water, the puffing steam, the shouts of the crew. It all filled him with a sense of wonder. "Look at that," Sam would say to his friends, pointing as a massive steamboat made its way down the river. Its large paddle wheels splashed water into the air, and smoke billowed from its stacks, painting the sky with white clouds. To young Sam, the steamboat wasn't just a way to travel. It was a symbol of adventure, of freedom, of the wild and exciting world beyond Hannibal. But more than anything, Sam admired the captain. There he was, standing tall on the deck, his hand resting confidently on the wheel, steering the great boat through the twists and turns of the Mississippi. Sam could only imagine the places the captain had been, the cities, the ports, the endless miles of river. He wanted to be just like him, bold, strong, and in command of his own ship. One afternoon, as Sam sat by the river, watching a steamboat slowly pass by, he closed his eyes and began to dream. He was no longer a boy sitting on the shore. He was the captain. He could feel the wooden wheel under his hands, hear the call of the crew, and feel the power of the river beneath his feet. "Steady as she goes!" Sam imagined himself shouting, his voice full of confidence. The boat would glide smoothly through the water, with Sam at the helm, leading it safely through the river's dangerous currents. The wind would whip through his hair, and the whistle would sound, loud and proud, announcing their arrival at every new port. He could see it all so clearly in his mind. The adventures, the challenges, the excitement of life on the river. And as he opened his eyes, the dream didn't fade. It stayed with him, burning brightly in his heart. "I'll be a riverboat captain one day," Sam whispered to himself, his eyes full of determination. "I'll ride the Mississippi, just like them." But for now, he was still a boy, watching, learning, and dreaming. Every time a new steamboat passed by, Sam studied it carefully, the way it moved, the way the crew worked together, the way the captain steered it with such skill. He absorbed it all, storing it in his memory, imagining the day when it would be his turn. The people in town often teased Sam for his wild dreams. "You're always talking about steamboats, Sam," they'd say with a laugh. "Why don't you try something more realistic?" But Sam didn't listen. He knew what he wanted, and nothing could shake his belief that one day he'd be up there, steering his own boat down the river just like the captains he admired so much. Even his brother Orion tried to convince him otherwise. "You're too young to be thinking about all that," Orion would say, shaking his head. "There's more to life than chasing steamboats, you know." But Sam just smiled. "Maybe," he replied, "but I'm going to see the river, Orion. I'm going to be a part of it." The river had a hold on Sam's heart, and nothing could break that bond. Every ripple of water, every turn of the current seemed to whisper his name, calling him to adventure. The steamboats were more than just machines. They were a gateway to the unknown, to the stories waiting to be told, to the experiences that would shape his future. One evening, as the sun set over the river, turning the water golden, Sam stood alone on the shore. He watched as the last steamboat of the day disappeared around a bend, its whistle fading into the distance. Someday, he thought, he would follow that same path. He would ride the river's waves, explore the world beyond Hannibal, and maybe, just maybe, he would tell the stories of all the people he met along the way. The river wasn't just about adventure. It was full of life, full of characters, full of tales waiting to be shared. And Sam knew, deep in his heart, that he was meant to be a storyteller. The steamboats and their captains had shown him the way to freedom, to discovery, and to storytelling. For now, Sam could only watch, but the fire of his dreams burned brighter than ever. Chapter 8. The Print Shop Apprentice. The smell of ink, the sound of paper rustling, the steady clack-clack of the printing press. Sam Clemens stood at the entrance of the local print shop, wide-eyed and full of curiosity. This was his first job, and he was about to step into a world that would change him forever. Sam was just a boy, but he already knew there was something magical about words. He had always loved stories, listening to his mother's tales by the fire, imagining his own adventures by the river. But now, he would learn about the power of the written word. "Come on in, boy," Mr. Ament, the print shop owner, called out from behind a stack of papers. He was a gruff, older man with ink-stained fingers and a serious look on his face. But Sam didn't mind. He was too excited to be scared. Sam walked in, the floor creaking under his feet. The shop was filled with the tools of the trade, rows of type, bottles of ink, piles of fresh paper. Everywhere he looked, there was something new to learn. "Your job is simple," Mr. Ament said, handing Sam a small box filled with metal letters. "You'll be helping set the type for the newspaper. Every letter, every word has to be placed just right, no mistakes." Sam nodded, his heart racing with excitement. He had never thought much about how words ended up on paper, but now he was going to learn every detail. It wasn't just about writing anymore. It was about creating something that people would read, something that could change their minds or touch their hearts. Sam took his place at the workbench and began carefully placing the metal letters into the frame, one by one. It was slow work, and sometimes frustrating, but there was something satisfying about it, something powerful. He watched as the letters slowly formed words, and the words formed sentences. These sentences would be printed and shared with the entire town. It made him feel important. As the days went by, Sam became more skilled. His hands moved faster, and his eyes could spot the smallest mistake. But more than anything, he became fascinated with the words themselves. The newspapers weren't just filled with stories about local events. They held ideas, opinions, and news from far-off places. The power of those words struck him. "Look at this, Mr. Ament," Sam said one afternoon, holding up a freshly printed page. "It's about the new railroad they're building. People all over the country will read this and know what's happening." Mr. Ament grunted, barely looking up from his work. "That's the point of a newspaper, boy. To inform people." But for Sam, it was more than just information. He saw how words could shape how people thought, how they felt. The right words, placed in the right order, could inspire someone to action, or make them see the world in a whole new way. One day, as he was setting type for a local story, Sam paused, staring at the letters in front of him. "I wonder," he thought aloud, "if I could write stories like this, if my words could reach people too." Mr. Ament glanced over at him. "Writing takes skill, boy. It's not just about stringing words together. It's about saying something worth reading." Sam nodded, feeling the weight of those words. Saying something worth reading. That was the key. It wasn't enough to just write for the sake of it. The words had to mean something. As the months went by, Sam found himself more and more drawn to the printed pages. He started paying attention to the way writers crafted their stories, how they grabbed the reader's attention with the first sentence, how they used vivid descriptions to paint pictures in people's minds. At night, after his work at the print shop was done, Sam would sit by the river, a notebook in his lap, and try his hand at writing. The words didn't always come easily, but he kept at it, filling the pages with his thoughts, his stories, his dreams. He was learning little by little how to make his words sing. There was one story he wrote that he was particularly proud of. It was about a boy who lived by the river, just like Sam, who longed for adventure. He scribbled furiously, his pen scratching across the page, his mind racing with ideas. When he finished, he held the paper up to the moonlight, reading it over with a smile. "I think I've got something here," he whispered to himself, feeling a rush of excitement. Maybe one day his words would be printed, just like the newspapers he helped create at the shop. Maybe his stories would travel far beyond Hannibal, to places he could only dream of. Working at the print shop wasn't just a job for Sam, it was a calling. It opened his eyes to the world of words, to the endless possibilities they held. He realized that with the right story, the right message, he could move people, inspire them, make them feel something deep inside. And so, as he set the type for yet another newspaper article, Sam's mind was already dreaming up new stories, new adventures, stories that one day the whole world would read. The world outside of Hannibal seemed so vast, so full of promise. As Sam Clemens grew older, the quiet life of his small town no longer satisfied his restless spirit. He was no longer the boy content with mischief by the riverbank, or playing pirates on Jackson's Island. No. Now, his heart ached for something bigger, something more. Stories began to float into Hannibal, carried by men returning from the Wild West. They told tales of vast open land, untamed wilderness, and the possibility of striking it rich with gold. Sam listened to these stories with wide eyes and a pounding heart. Each story felt like an invitation to adventure. His mind wandered, imagining dusty roads, golden sunsets, and wild, lawless towns where anything could happen. "Did you hear, Sam?" one of the townspeople whispered to him one afternoon. "A man struck gold out west, made himself a fortune in just a few weeks. People are leaving for California, hoping to find the same luck." Sam's pulse quickened. Gold? Adventure? His young mind buzzed with the possibilities. He could picture himself riding through the open plains, discovering hidden treasures, meeting rough and fearless men who lived free from the constraints of civilized life. The wild frontier called to him like the river once did, but this time the call was louder and harder to resist. He imagined the excitement of traveling out west, beyond the safety of the Mississippi, to places no one in Hannibal had ever seen. The tales of opportunity felt like an irresistible pull, tugging at Sam's adventurous soul. After all, wasn't that what he had always wanted? To leave behind the small-town life and see what the world had to offer? One evening, as he sat by the river, staring out at the water, his thoughts raced. "I can't stay here forever," he whispered to himself. The peaceful river no longer seemed to hold the same magic it once had. Sam's dreams were now too big for Hannibal, too wild to be contained. At the print shop, Sam overheard more and more talk about the frontier. Men would gather to read the latest newspapers, which were full of stories about the westward expansion. Some of them were already making plans to leave. They would huddle together, speaking in low voices about what they would need for the journey. Horses, supplies, maps. "It's dangerous," one man said. "Not everyone makes it. There are outlaws, and the land is harsh." But even the danger excited Sam. He didn't want a safe life. He wanted a life filled with risk, with excitement, with stories waiting to be lived. The quiet routine of setting type in the print shop wasn't enough anymore. His heart yearned for something far beyond the borders of Hannibal, far beyond the Mississippi River. His family, of course, was worried. "Sam," his mother Jane said one night, "I know you've got dreams, but the world out there is not as kind as you might think. There's no guarantee of fortune or fame. What if you don't come back?" But Sam, ever the dreamer, couldn't be held back by fear. "I have to go, Ma," he replied softly. "There's something out there for me. I can feel it." He knew that leaving wouldn't be easy. Hannibal was his home. His family was here. But the stories of the Wild West burned in his mind, like a fire he couldn't put out. The thought of new lands, new experiences, and new challenges consumed him. Sam began to imagine himself as a writer. Not just a boy working in a print shop, but a man who traveled the world, gathering stories from faraway places. He could already see himself sitting in a dusty saloon out west, listening to the tales of gold miners, adventurers, and gamblers. He would write down their stories, bring them to life with his words, and share them with the world. More than anything, Sam wanted freedom. He didn't want to be tied down by the expectations of small-town life. He wanted to be out there, on the edge of civilization, where anything could happen. One day, after setting the last line of type at the print shop, Sam wiped the ink from his hands and looked out the window. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the river, and for the first time, the sight didn't fill him with the usual comfort. Instead, it made him restless. "I'm going west," he whispered to himself, his decision finally made. I'm going to see it all. And so, with a heart full of dreams and the spirit of adventure burning inside him, Sam began to make plans to leave. The frontier was calling, and Sam Clemens was ready to answer. Chapter 10. The Tragedy on the River. The Mississippi River, once Sam Clemens's greatest source of joy and wonder, became the setting for a moment that would change his life forever. It was no longer just the mighty river of his dreams, of steamboats and adventure. It became a place of deep sorrow, a place that haunted him. It was a warm summer day when tragedy struck. Sam's older brother, Henry Clemens, had recently taken a job as a clerk on a steamboat. Henry was kind, gentle, and admired by everyone who knew him. Sam had always looked up to him, proud of his brother's steady nature. But on this day, everything changed. Sam had always loved the river, and the sight of a steamboat filled him with excitement. But this time, the news of a terrible accident on the river reached him. The steamboat Pennsylvania, where Henry worked, had suffered a horrific explosion. The boiler had burst, sending fire and debris through the air. Chaos erupted on the boat. Sam's heart pounded as he heard the news. "No, it can't be," he whispered, his voice shaking. Fear gripped him as he rushed to find out if his brother had survived the blast. He wanted to believe that Henry was safe, that somehow he had escaped the disaster. But when Sam finally arrived, his worst fears were confirmed. Henry was gravely injured, his body broken and burned from the explosion. Sam could hardly recognize him, lying there so still, struggling to breathe. Sam's heart broke as he sat by Henry's side. He watched helplessly, tears in his eyes, as his brother clung to life. "Hold on, Henry," Sam whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "Please, hold on." For days, Sam stayed with Henry, praying for a miracle, but despite his hopes, Henry's injuries were too severe. On June 21st, 1858, Henry Clemens passed away. Sam's world was shattered. The grief was overwhelming, the pain unbearable. Sam couldn't believe that his brother, his friend, his guide was gone. The river, once a source of life and adventure, had taken something precious from him. Every ripple of the water seemed to echo the tragedy, the loss that now weighed heavily on his heart. "I should have been there," Sam thought, his mind filled with guilt. He blamed himself for not being able to protect his brother, for not being able to save him. The river, which had once called to him with the promise of freedom, now felt like a dark and dangerous force, one that had stolen Henry away. Days turned into weeks, but the sorrow stayed with Sam. He couldn't shake the memory of that terrible accident, the sight of his brother lying injured, and the moment when Henry's breath finally left him. The river wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't the place of joy and adventure it had been in Sam's boyhood. As he walked along the riverbank, the once familiar sound of the water no longer brought him peace. The steamboats that passed by now seemed cold and dangerous. The whistle, once a sound that filled him with excitement, now felt like a mournful cry, a reminder of what had been lost. The tragedy left a deep mark on Sam's soul. He carried the weight of Henry's death with him, and the memory of that terrible day stayed with him for the rest of his life. The river, once his greatest dream, now held painful memories. Memories that would never fully leave him. But even in his grief, something inside Sam began to change. He realized that life was fragile, that time was precious. The loss of his brother taught him that no moment should be wasted. His dreams of adventure were still alive, but now they were filled with a deeper purpose. He wanted to live fully, to experience everything the world had to offer, and to share the stories of the people he met along the way. Henry's death was a turning point for Sam. It was a tragedy that haunted him, yes, but it also shaped him into the man he would become. It gave him a greater understanding of life's joys and sorrows, of its beauty and its pain. It would later inspire the depth and emotion in the stories he would write, stories that would touch the hearts of millions. The river continued to flow just as it always had. But for Sam, it would never be the same again. It was a place of both wonder and heartbreak, a place where his dreams had begun and where his greatest sorrow was born. But from that sorrow, Sam Clemens would rise, and the stories that would follow would carry with them the weight of all he had experienced. Chapter 11. The Dream of Becoming a Pilot. The Mississippi River flowed on, despite Sam Clemens' grief, despite the tragedy that had taken his brother. But even as the pain lingered in his heart, there was something about the river that still called to him. Its power, its mystery, and its endless path to new adventures. It all pulled him back, even when it hurt. Sam's fascination with steamboats never faded. Even as a boy, he had admired the captains, men who seemed to command the very waters beneath them, steering those massive boats through the twists and turns of the river. They were masters of the Mississippi. And now, more than ever, Sam wanted to be one of them. The dream of becoming a riverboat pilot grew stronger with each passing day. Sam could picture it so clearly, standing at the wheel, eyes sharp, guiding the boat through dangerous currents, avoiding hidden sandbars. He would know the river like the back of his hand, every bend, every shallow spot, every secret. "I'm going to do it," Sam whispered to himself one day, standing by the water's edge. His reflection rippled in the river, and he felt a fire inside him. Determination. "I'll become a pilot, just like I always dreamed." But becoming a riverboat pilot wasn't easy. It took skill, patience, and a deep understanding of the river. The Mississippi was unpredictable, full of surprises, and only the best pilots could navigate it safely. Sam knew that if he wanted to master the river, he would have to learn from the best. His chance came when he met Horace Bixby, a seasoned steamboat pilot who knew the Mississippi like no one else. Bixby was strict, serious, and had little time for mistakes. He didn't care for dreamers, but something about Sam's determination caught his attention. "You want to be a pilot, do you?" Bixby asked, his eyes narrowing as he studied Sam. "Yes, sir," Sam replied, standing tall. "More than anything." Bixby let out a low grunt, not impressed just yet. "It's not as easy as you think, boy. The river's a dangerous place, and it takes years to learn her ways. Think you're up for that?" Sam nodded without hesitation. "I know it's hard, but I'm ready." With that, Sam began his apprenticeship under Bixby. It was grueling work, hours spent standing at the wheel, eyes fixed on the water, learning every inch of the river. Bixby taught him how to read the signs of the river, how to spot the dangerous sandbars that could sink a steamboat in seconds, how to navigate through fog so thick you couldn't see the bow of the boat. "The river is always changing," Bixby would say in his deep, gravelly voice. "You think you've got her figured out, and then she shows you something new. You've got to be ready. Always." Sam listened carefully, his eyes wide as he absorbed every lesson. The river was a living thing, full of secrets, and Sam was determined to learn them all. He worked harder than he ever had before. He had to. His heart was set on becoming a true pilot, and nothing would stop him. At night, when the river was quiet and the moonlight danced on the water, Sam would stand at the helm, feeling the boat move beneath him. He imagined himself as the captain in full control of the massive vessel. He could feel the power of the river, but instead of fear, he felt a deep connection, like the river was speaking to him, guiding him. One night, after a long day of training, Bixby stood next to Sam as they navigated a tricky stretch of the river. The boat creaked as it turned sharply, avoiding a hidden sandbar just in time. "You've got a good feel for the river, Clemens," Bixby said quietly, surprising Sam with the rare compliment. "Keep at it, and you just might make a pilot yet." Sam's heart swelled with pride. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, and now it was within reach. He would become a riverboat pilot, just like the men he had admired as a boy. He would master the river. But it wasn't just the thrill of the job that excited Sam. As he spent more time on the river, he began to see the stories all around him, the lives of the passengers, the crew, the towns they passed along the way. The river was full of people, full of experiences, full of tales waiting to be told. Sam's love of storytelling began to bloom alongside his dream of becoming a pilot. He would jot down little notes, ideas for characters, scenes from life on the river. He could feel the stories forming in his mind, inspired by the very waters he was learning to navigate. The river had given him so much: adventure, challenge, even heartache. But now, it was also giving him inspiration. Sam realized that the river wasn't just a path to becoming a pilot. It was the heart of the stories he would one day write. And so, Sam continued his journey. Learning, growing, and slowly mastering the mighty Mississippi. Every day brought new lessons, new challenges, but Sam's determination never wavered. He would become a pilot, and he would become a storyteller too. The river still held its mysteries, but Sam was ready to face them all. Chapter 12. A Writer in the Making. Sam Clemens had always been a dreamer, but now, as he began to explore the world beyond Hannibal, something was changing inside him. The young boy who once sat by the river imagining adventures was now living them. And with each new place, with every new person he met, the urge to write became stronger. His pen, it was becoming his true companion. After spending time as a riverboat pilot, Sam had seen more of the world than most people in his small town could even imagine. The bustling cities along the Mississippi, the quiet towns, the rough and wild frontiers, each place was filled with stories waiting to be told. He carried a small notebook with him everywhere, scribbling down bits and pieces of life as they caught his eye. A man sitting at the bar in a dusty saloon, a woman haggling for bread in a crowded market, a child chasing a dog down a narrow alley. These weren't just random moments to Sam. They were snapshots of life, full of color, humor, and meaning. As he traveled further west, the excitement of the frontier began to shape his writing. He felt the pull of adventure stronger than ever. The stories of gold miners, cowboys, and gamblers filled his mind. Every dusty trail, every sunset over the wide open plains brought with it new inspiration. One evening, after a long day's journey, Sam found himself sitting by a campfire under the stars. The flames crackled softly, and the vast sky above seemed to stretch out forever. He pulled out his notebook and began to write. The words flowed easily, as if the fire and the stars themselves were telling him what to say. He wrote about the people, the tough, rugged men who lived by their wits, the hopeful dreamers searching for fortune, and the ordinary folks just trying to make a life in this wild, new world. Sam could feel the characters coming to life on the page. With each line, they became more real, their voices echoing in his mind. "This is it," Sam whispered to himself, feeling the thrill of creation. "This is what I'm meant to do." The more he wrote, the more he realized that writing wasn't just about putting words on paper. It was about capturing life, about seeing the humor, the sadness, and the beauty in the world around him. His stories were filled with the sights and sounds of the places he had been, the voices of the people he had met. He wasn't just writing for himself anymore. Sam wanted to share these stories with others, to make them laugh, to make them think, to take them on the same adventures he had experienced. He wanted his words to jump off the page and into the hearts of readers everywhere. One of the first stories Sam wrote was inspired by a group of miners he had met during his travels. They were tough men, hardened by the search for gold, but they had a sharp wit and a sense of humor that reminded Sam of the friends he had grown up with in Hannibal. He wrote about their struggles, their dreams, and their wild misadventures in the gold fields. As the words came together, Sam couldn't help but smile. The story was funny, full of life, but also touched with a deeper sense of humanity. It wasn't just about finding gold. It was about the friendships, the hope, and the failures that came with chasing a dream. When he finished writing the story, Sam read it over, his heart pounding with excitement. This is good," he whispered, hardly believing it himself. But writing was just the beginning. Sam knew that to become a real storyteller, he needed to share his work with the world. He began submitting his stories to local newspapers, hoping that his words would find an audience. At first, there were rejections. Lots of them. But Sam didn't give up. He kept writing, kept refining his craft, pouring his heart into every sentence. And then, finally, one of his stories was published. Seeing his words in print for the first time was a moment Sam would never forget. The ink on the page, the excitement of knowing that people, real people, were reading his work brought him a joy he hadn't expected. "This is just the beginning," he thought, his eyes shining with excitement. "There are so many more stories to tell." Sam's love for writing grew stronger with every story he wrote. He realized that the world was full of characters, full of adventures, full of untold tales just waiting to be captured. His pen became his key to that world, and with it, he could unlock the hidden beauty, the humor, and the complexity of life. As the fire died down that night, Sam sat back looking at the stars once more. His journey as a writer had only just begun, but he knew, deep in his heart, that he was on the right path. The young boy from Hannibal was becoming a storyteller in his own right. The world was his to explore, and the stories were his to tell. Chapter 13. The Birth of Mark Twain. Mark Twain, a name that would soon be known far and wide. But before Sam Clemens became the legendary writer, he was just a young man searching for his voice. And when he found it, under the name Mark Twain, everything changed. Sam had spent years traveling, working as a riverboat pilot, writing for newspapers, and exploring the vast world beyond Hannibal. He had seen so much, experienced so many stories. But it wasn't until he began to truly reflect on his own past that his voice as a writer came alive. The adventures of his childhood, the people he had met, and the life he had lived along the Mississippi. They were waiting to be told. But first, he needed a name. A name that wasn't just Sam Clemens, but something that reflected the spirit of adventure, the thrill of the river, and the humor of the life he had lived. And that's when it came to him. Mark Twain. The name Mark Twain came from Sam's time as a riverboat pilot. It was a term used by steamboat crews to measure the depth of the river. "Mark Twain," they would call out, meaning the water was deep enough for safe passage. It was a phrase full of meaning for Sam. Deep water, safe travels, adventure ahead. It was the perfect name for a man who was about to navigate the world of storytelling. As Mark Twain, Sam found his voice. It wasn't the formal, serious tone that many writers of the time used. No. His voice was lively, full of humor and heart. He wrote like he spoke, with honesty, wit, and a love for the world around him. And as he began to write about the adventures of his childhood, those stories flowed from him like the river itself. Wild, heartfelt, and unforgettable. One of his first great stories was The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County. It was full of humor, trickery, and the kind of larger-than-life characters that Sam had known growing up. The story was a success. People loved it. And with that success, Mark Twain began to take shape, not just as a name, but as a legend. But it was the stories of his childhood, the ones filled with the adventures he had lived as a boy along the Mississippi, that would truly make him famous. He began to write about Tom Sawyer, a boy who got into all kinds of mischief, just like Sam had. Tom's adventures were inspired by Sam's own wild childhood. Fishing by the river, playing pirates on Jackson's Island, sneaking into caves, and pulling pranks on everyone in town. As Mark Twain wrote, he could see it all again. Hannibal, the river, the hills, the people who had shaped his life. It was as if those moments from his past were coming alive on the page. Tom Sawyer wasn't just a character, he was Sam. And through writing, Sam was able to relive those joyful, carefree days and share them with the world. Readers loved Tom Sawyer. The book was filled with excitement, laughter, and heart. It captured the spirit of boyhood, the thrill of adventure, the fear of punishment, and the joy of friendship. People from all over the world connected with the stories of Tom and his friends, and Mark Twain's name began to spread. But it wasn't just Tom Sawyer that made Mark Twain a legend. Soon after, he began writing about another boy, Huck Finn. Huck was different from Tom, rougher around the edges, wilder and free-spirited. But Huck's story was also Sam's story. It was about life on the river, about freedom and adventure, but it was also about deeper things, about society, morality, and the struggles of growing up. As Mark Twain continued to write, the stories poured out of him. They were funny, yes, but they were also full of emotion. Love, loss, hope, and the complicated truths of life. His voice was unlike anyone else's. It was real. It was alive. And it spoke directly to the hearts of readers. With each new book, Mark Twain's legend grew. He wasn't just a writer anymore. He was a storyteller, a voice for a generation. His stories reached people all over the world, from the streets of Missouri to the grand cities of Europe. And through his writing, Sam Clemens became something more than just a boy from Hannibal. He became Mark Twain, a name that would stand the test of time. As the sun set over the Mississippi, the river that had inspired him for so long, Sam Clemens knew one thing for sure. He had found his voice. And through that voice, he would continue to tell the stories that mattered, the stories that would last forever. Chapter 14. The Road Ahead. With a pen in hand and the world at his feet, Mark Twain, the boy from Hannibal, now a young man, was ready to take on whatever the future had in store. The road ahead stretched wide and full of possibilities. The world was calling to him, and Sam Clemens, under his new name, was ready to answer. He had found his voice, his way of telling stories, but he wasn't done yet. There were still so many adventures waiting for him, so many lessons to be learned, and so many stories that needed to be told. Twain's journey as a writer was just beginning. By now, he had traveled far beyond the riverbanks of the Mississippi. He had seen the bustling streets of cities, the vast wilderness of the frontier, and the wild energy of the West, and yet there was still so much more out there. Twain had an insatiable curiosity, a hunger for more experiences, more people, more places. He set out to travel not just across America, but across the world. With every journey, he gathered new stories, new adventures that would later fill the pages of his books. From the rough miners in California, to the grand cities of Europe, to the exotic lands across the seas. Mark Twain was always looking for the next great tale. He became a man known for his wit and humor, but also for his sharp eye. He didn't just see the world, he understood it. Twain had a way of observing life's little details, the way people spoke, the way they moved, the things they cared about, and turning those details into unforgettable characters and stories. "I want to write stories that make people feel something," Twain once said, his voice filled with passion. Stories that make them laugh, make them think, make them live. The road ahead was not always easy. There were challenges, failures, and moments of doubt, but Mark Twain never stopped writing, never stopped chasing the next adventure. He poured his heart and soul into every book, every story, every word. And as he did, he continued to grow, not just as a writer, but as a person. The adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, the stories of the American frontier, the tales of travel and exploration, all of these would become part of the fabric of American literature. Mark Twain's voice would become the voice of a nation, capturing the essence of the American experience, both its joys and its struggles. But Twain wasn't thinking about legacy. No. He was too busy living in the moment, always moving forward, always looking for the next story to tell. The world was full of life, full of lessons, and Twain wanted to capture it all. As he stood at the edge of the next great adventure, Twain looked out at the horizon. The future was wide open, and the possibilities seemed endless. He was ready to take on whatever came his way, with a pen in his hand and a heart full of stories. The boy from Hannibal had come a long way. He had faced hardship, loss, and challenges, but through it all, he had found his passion, his purpose. He was not just Sam Clemens anymore. He was Mark Twain, and his journey, both as a writer and as a man, was far from over. The road ahead was bright, filled with stories waiting to be told. And as Twain set off on that road, he knew one thing for sure. He would never stop writing, never stop exploring, and never stop sharing his stories with the world. Mark Twain was on a journey, and the future of American literature would never be the same.